Okay. So what I thought I'd do, rather than speak about the work that's here at Brown, is to speak about some former projects that I think offer some context to the work presented here. I make sculptures and installations that often respond to the specific attributes of a given location, architectural setting, or social landscape. Though working with site or context specifically, I often choose to focus on exactly those features of a site that are encountered elsewhere in the everyday experiences of the spectator. I've thus initiated projects on the basis of mere cracks in a cement floor, a derelict cafe, a shop window, or even that most generic feature of an exhibition space, the white walls of the gallery. I typically use modest materials to produce sometimes subtle, conceptual, or formal effects that stage an alteration or a shift of perception within the immediate environment. The materials I use vary between projects and have included plastics, measuring devices, text and signage, utilitarian lights, a garden decoy, and as here, amplified sound. The first, I'm going to show you 4 projects that have been chosen because they employ sound in some way. And the first is Having Been Held Under This Way. This work was commissioned for the 2011 Istanbul Biennial. And knowing that I was making a site-specific piece for Istanbul, I set to create out a work that embodied the ruptures and veneers of Turkey's telling of its history and representation of its current conflicts. That is, I meant to make a work that would be at once undeniably present and yet obscured. So in this installation, infrasonic sine waves, which are really low frequencies that one feels in the body rather than hears, and there's not sound working, so y'all can work on that maybe. So anyways, these really low frequencies in the room articulated the physical materials of that space. The sound waves cause stress on the drywall and studs of the room in which the work exists, and the stress and movement of these materials are all that's ultimately audible. The sound's on, so.
There's no sound coming out of anything.
I know. I don't know. Well, we'll just do it without sound. Who needs sound? And it's just documentation anyway. So.
I think it was working. It was just quiet.
Oh, did you turned it down for Tristan?
I heard it rumbling.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So. There was a rumbling in the piece. The sound waves stress the drywall and the materials of the space, and the stress and movement of the materials is what's audible in the space, rather than anything coming from the transducers that I used. The only other component of this work is a plumb bob that in this instance functions to register the perturbation of the walls and to respond even as its conventional use is compromised in doing so. So it's swaying back and forth. More recent works, this is supposed to come next. More recent works similarly use an unremarkable signal to articulate physical features of a space, which might be an architectural space or a space created in the context of a sculpture. In each envelope as before, this work is part of a series of related sculptures that were presented in 2013 at the Berkeley Art Museum. And in this work, a shiny black acrylic vitrine sits atop a metal frame. Though the interior of the vitrine is unavailable and unseen, the viewer is acutely tuned to its parameters, as solenoid pins located inside the opaque container tap a rhythm that is not quite regular, articulating this space within the vitrine and also resonating throughout the floors of the entire museum. Sorry, I didn't order these. Okay. Occasional Music was a 5-month-long public installation in downtown Oakland, California. This work consists of brass bells that simultaneously ring from rooftops radiating out from Oscar Grant Plaza. Activated for several minutes once a day at a randomly predetermined time, each bell plays a unique but strictly coordinated series of accelerandos and retardandos, in effect sounding a chorus of bells, distinct to each day of its installation. In both Each Envelope Is Before and Occasional Music, an impulse registers within and against the materials that form the work. In Each Envelope Is Before, the materials comprise a sculpture within a gallery. In Occasional Music, the space is that of the city and the myriad occlusions that occur and characterize it. Occasional music takes place in the present, is different each day, and is experienced variously according to the viewer's position and movement through the space, much as the work installed in the Bell Gallery. In randomizing the activation of the ringing throughout the day, I mean for the signals to hail a range of auditors, some of whom are engaged in activities other than evaluating artwork, and some who have shown up for that express purpose. As a demonstration was presented alongside and in contrast to Each Envelope as before, and this exhibition occurred at the same time as Occasional Music. And as a demonstration, sound waves are audible because of, sound waves are inaudible because of the material components or lack thereof in this instance, in the piece. In order to be heard, sound needs a medium to travel through, and within the near vacuum conditions of an acrylic chamber, the air has almost no material. This apparatus and setup is probably familiar from physics lab, but here the arrangement is presented in the context of a museum and in the context of other artworks. Thus, and as a demonstration, the bell's sound, or rather the very air through which it travels, is attenuated by a component of the museum's apparatus, the vitrine as a vacuum chamber here. The last work I will mention from this same series is Ad Libitum, If I Had a Hammer. The materials of this work, bone saddles, a tuner, and a brass wire, could all be used to form an instrument whose body, in this case, is the wall of a museum. In this sculpture, the wire is divided into intervals, and these intervals express the pitches that comprise Pete Seeger and Lee Hayes' song, If I Had a Hammer. The title of this piece, and the others in this series, as a demonstration, Each Envelope Is Before, as well as the work here at Brown, which is titled In Unison, function as both direction and description in the way that dynamic markings, such as cambrio or staccato in music, might function. However, in this case, the work is mute and not played, and like a museum wall text, is experienced by reading. This piece makes a distinction between the solitary and the social, while it operates according to the rules of the museum. Objects are off limits and not to be touched, and museum objects still address a disinterested spectator. In these installations involving sound, I'm specifically focused on the acoustic properties of space, In other words, I'm concerned more with the response of a space than with the purposefully unremarkable impulse that excites it. Through these and other sculptures and installations, my work addresses the dynamics established between spectators and sites. My aim is to generalize the effect of defamiliarization produced at the site of the work so that the viewer might more readily recall in the commonplace the strangeness that is proposed by the artwork.